Hi Bio20. Today we are wrapping up section 8.3 lymphatic system with two separate video lessons. One for the first part of 8.3 on how the lymphatic system works and how the immune response works. Part 2 will be about the different blood types and Rh factor, as well as immune system disorders. So we're starting off with the jobs of the lymphatic system, which you have heard about a little bit in the digestive system, because we've heard of how the lymphatic system carries the digested fats from your intestines. And that is one of the jobs of the lymphatic system. It's an interesting set of vessels, similar to circulatory system vessels, except all of the lymphatic vessels all travel one way, and that is to pick up fluids in tissue fluid around the body and bring it back to the chest area, and those excess fluids get dumped back into the bloodstream. Now, the reason those have to be picked up is that there's some pressure in blood vessels, and so that sort of squeezes out some of the plasma. That's what tissue fluid is. Or you may have a like a sprained ankle that swells up, and that is extra tissue fluid that also has to be brought back into the bloodstream. So we've got picking up of tissue fluid as one job. We've got picking up digested fats in the lacteals in the small intestine. So that's the second job. And the third job is that in the nodes, the little lymph nodes found everywhere, is a spot where lymphocytes, a type of white blood cell that will reproduce in the lymph, that's where they are stored and produced. So that is what our notes start off with, just talking about how fluid is balanced by the picking up of the tissue fluid, sometimes called interstitial fluid, talking about how the digested fats are picked up, and third, how lymphocytes or white blood cells, a certain type of white blood cells, is reproducing in the lymph. And as well, we have macrophages, the big eating type white blood cells that are found in the lymph as well, which is why when you have some infection that you're fighting, you may feel a bit of swollen glands like in your neck, where you can see there are quite a few lymph nodes. So this picture is just showing that as blood flows through our blood vessels, the pressure there is squeezing out some fluid, and the green here is showing you lymphatic system vessels that can pick up the fluid and carry it, so we balance the fluid around the body and you don't get like swollen areas. So, or if there is swollen areas like swollen feet after being on a very long plane ride, for example, your lymphatic system will pick up that extra tissue fluid and take it back to the blood vessels. So our second part of today's lesson is about the immune response. And of course, you're exposed to many microorganisms at all times. They might call them pathogens. So they're bad things that you may be exposed to, including viruses, bacteria, parasites. And you have defenses to deal with that. So the first line of defense is the things that your body has in place, like skin everywhere, which is a big barrier. It's actually, the skin has bactericides and is fairly acidic, so there's a lot of things about the skin, and it covers most of your body. A lot of structures in place that help the skin be a very efficient barrier to a lot of these pathogens, but also things like the eyelashes that sweep it away, the cilia that is in your respiratory tract, so every breath that you take, cilia is catching dust that you can cough out, tears that are antibacterial, stomach acid that kills pretty much all bacteria that will be on any food that you would swallow. So these would be considered your first line of defense, these body structures. The second line of defense would be to take care of invaders as soon as they get into the body, and as soon as you're born, you have monocytes that will turn into macrophages, which are big engulfing bacteria. And what they would do is they would, oops, I didn't mean to get rid of that whole guy, but they would engulf, if I was to draw bacteria in green here, the macrophage would engulf bacteria and eat it basically by phagocytosis. And we have some videos coming up to take a peek at those. There's some actual footage of bacteria being consumed by a macrophage. The second kind of cell that is formed at birth is natural killer cells. And these are lymphocytes that can get rid of, they're white blood cells that can get rid of infected cells. So if cells are full of viruses or full of bacteria, then the lymphocytes can destroy those and get rid of them. Okay, moving on, we're going to look at immunity that is cell-mediated but not specific. So this is something where chemicals get released when macrophages eat bacteria. So when this happens here and Mr. Macrophage eats the bacteria, he sends out little, they're called lymphokines, little chemical messengers that will tell the body that there's an infection around, that he is just picked up a bad guy, so we've got to start the immune response. It also will set the body's hypothalamus will set the body's temperature a bit higher, because a higher body temperature is, for, well, a few degrees anyways, will not harm any of our body cells, but it could denature proteins and kill bacteria. So a fever is actually the body's response to trying to get rid of bacteria. So probably not the best idea to try to get a fever down immediately after you have it. If it's getting too high or if it's been a few days, that may be necessary, but that is your body's way of getting rid of bacteria. So the next thing that happens is once those chemical messengers head out to the cells and the white blood cells are aware that there's a bacteria invasion, then the next thing that happens is that antibodies start being formed. These are little Y-shaped proteins that are useful in clumping a whole bunch of bacteria together. So it's like a sticky sort of molecule that will clump a whole bunch of bacteria. And the reason it's so efficient is that now a macrophage can come along and eat a whole bunch of them all at once. So it's very helpful to have an antibody to put those bacteria in big clumps. So there is other cells that will be involved as soon as the immune response gets rolling. And there are, if you see the word B cells, just know that those are ones that matured in the bone marrow. And if you see T cells of any kind, you know that they matured in the thymus. That's how they got their name. But I'm going to flip now to this diagram, and you can follow along as to, trying to find a color I haven't used here, follow along to what happens in the immune response. So first of all, if some bacteria do get through into your body, so this could be through a cut, for example, we could call those bacteria pathogens. And bacteria will have these markers on them. So they are called antigen markers. Antigen means something that is foreign to your body. So those markers will get recognized. Number 2 in my picture here will get recognized by the macrophage. As he consumes those bacteria, the protein markers get left outside of the macrophage cell. And so that allows other cells to recognize that Mr. Macrophage has just consumed some bad bacteria and they are around. So I'm going to go to number 3, step 3. I call her helper T Helen. She goes around and she's got her hand out. She recognizes that macrophage has these bacterial antigens on his surface, and she gets busy at doing some signaling. So her job, helper T Helen, is to signal B cells, like Bubbles B cell here, to actually bubble up. I called him that for a reason. He bubbles up, becomes bigger, and starts pumping out antibodies at about 2,000 antibodies per second. 2,000 per second. And that's a lot of antibodies that will quickly be there to specifically be sticking together that bacteria. Antibodies are specific to the pathogen. So helper T Helen has signaled the B cell. Helper T Helen also signals the killer T cells. And the killer T cells are going around and using a puncturing method. I put a gun in the picture, but they actually do puncture holes in cells that are either all infected with bacteria, or cells sometimes that are foreign to the body because they're cancerous and not useful body cells. So killer T cells also help the immune response. And in just to make sure this is very efficient, this whole immune response is efficient in recognizing this bacteria, should this bacteria ever invade again, what happens is the memory B cells will form and remember the way to make those antibodies, and memory T cells will form and be ready to tell the killer T's if that invader should come back. So we have these memory T's and memory B's that will allow this immune response to be very, very quick the second time of an exposure to the same bacteria. To end up my story, we've got the suppressor T cells that when we have this under control, the suppressor T will say, okay, everybody stop the immune response because the job is done. And if we don't stop it, then guys like killer T over here could start attacking your own healthy body cells if he was still on a rampage. So white blood cells, generally when there's some immune response going on, they will be in high numbers for like around maybe up to 3 days, and then they back off because suppressor T shuts it all down and gets rid of the immune cells so they don't attack your own body. Okay, so you can photograph this immune response if you like the visual. You can sketch your own picture. That's what we would do in class, is sketch your own picture of the immune response. And just add some numbers here, maybe 8 steps that you can write down. And you can follow this along on your own piece of paper. So going back to the couple more slides that we have to wrap this up, is that the B cells and T cells have receptors so that they can tell if something is a foreign antigen, and this is what makes organ donations difficult, because everybody's proteins on their organs, on their cells, are different than anyone else's. So basically, to be a recipient of an organ, you have to take anti-rejection medication so that your immune system is not, basically to suppress your immune system, so you are not attacking that other person's donated organ. So the notes that come over here and over here are basically about the story I just told you about our immune response. Check out these videos, they're excellent. Here is a T cell, killer T, that's attacking the cancer cell here. It goes and wraps around, and actually the killer T cell will puncture holes, actual like huge holes in cells like tumor cells or foreign cells. Here's more pictures of lethal holes left behind by a killer T. And this talks about the suppressor Ts and memory Ts and memory Bs that stay around. This is the from A to G, the picture that your notes in your textbook had to explain the immune response. I just think that it may be easier to follow the picture that I gave you. You can take a look at both. They've got similar information. I just kind of outlined my steps a little more. And this picture is just showing you that it may take, I think it's a bit exaggerated, about to get a maximum immune response, it would take longer if it's the first time you've been exposed to it, but a lot faster immune response if you have had it before, because your memory Bs and memory Ts will get the B cells making antibodies and the killer Ts going again very quickly if you have had it before. And another little immunity video to wrap this up. Thank you very much for